Today we're checking out a knife sharpener from Sharpworx. This is a freehand sharpening system that's mixed with a fixed angled sharpening system. Now traditionally, you either had a fixed angled knife sharpening system or you did freehand. This mixes the two together and could possibly allow you to learn how to do freehand and possibly get better at it. Now we're going to talk about how it works, the good things about it, the bad things about it, the things I don't like, and whether or not it actually can help you learn freehand, or is it just another sharpening system. The way this works is you have a rod that's mounted on the back of the system. Now this thing just basically goes right over the back of this little sharpener. Now this one originally came by itself as its own sharpener that also was a freehand fixed angled system. However, I had a lot of issues with it. I did not like it. I had problem after problem. There were some knives that worked well and then a lot that did not. So instead of going through all the troubles I had with this, I'm just going to show you the one that, I do think is a little bit more promising, which is after you buy this attachment. So this was separately and had its own attachment with the diamond plate. This slips right over the top just like this. And then you put the clamps in, you have the rod holder, and now you have a magnetic fixed angled knife holder. So you put the stone inside the base, and this is a magnetic holder right here that holds the blade. Now you can adjust this right here to go forward or down depending on the width of the knife. So if it's a slim knife, you can move this up so you only have the one magnet. If it's a large knife, you can go with both magnets so that you have more room. Then you have the angles on the side right here. Now, the angles, they go from 10 degrees up to 30 degrees. As you can see, there's different angles or different numbers on each side. And you just untwist this. And then you can easily just adjust it to the angle that you want. When the knife is clamped and you are ready to sharpen, once you're done with the first side and you have a burr and your scratch pattern is from the top of the bevel down to the apex, from the heel of the blade to the tip, you're going to want to flip to the other side. Now, there's multiple ways you can do this. One, you could flip it so that it's for an ambidextrous person. So now you'd have to use your left hand. I'm personally not ambidextrous, so what I do is I tend to either one, just go this direction, which to be honest, the angle doesn't match as well. So what I do is I'll flip the stone completely over to this side and then go this way. So when I'm doing the opposite side, I flip the device over or around and start working this direction. And then when I want to go back, I just take the knife off, flip it this way, and now I do a pulling motion. So one is a pushing, one is a pulling, and I find that in that way the angles do match. But you always could do it the ambidextrous way. You just got to find what works for you. So here's how you sharpen a knife on this system. You get your knife, stick it to the magnet, try to remember the exact same place that you put it. So whichever way you put it, you might want to push it all the way up to the heel, or if you do put it in the center, maybe mark it with a marker or something like that, some way to know that you're going to put it in the exact same spot, or at least very close to it. And then pop it on the stone, make sure the edge is hitting the stone, and go to work. You're going to pull in towards you, and as you get to the tip, you're going to raise your elbow in order to get to the tip. Very similar to regular freehand. Now the difference with this is in some cases you're going to have to flex your wrist a little bit more than you would with freehand. So that is one major difference, but it's very, very similar nevertheless. So once you're done with this side, and once your scratch pattern is from the top of the bevel all the way to the apex, from the heel of the blade all the way to the tip, then you can switch to the other side and do the exact same thing. Now you can also kind of, when you're coming across the stone, kind of turn into the tip. But you're still going to want to raise your elbow slightly in order to get to it. Just don't let the knife flex or pop off of the magnet and you're going to be just fine. If you ever do feel it pulling off or flexing off of the magnet, then you are doing something wrong. Then, once you're done with the opposite side, flip over to the finishing stone. And when you are going to the opposite side, it's good to do a quick burr flip. So if my burr is on this side, right, the burr's folded over this way, I just want to give it one or two edge trailing passes just to knock the burr over to the other side, because what you don't want to do is just start sharpening, and what'll happen is the burr will just tear off and it could possibly take steel with it. Now, if this is one of your lower grit stones, it might not be that big of an issue, but when you get up to your finishing stones and things like that, you want to make sure you do that. And once you're done with the other side, or that side, flip it over and do the opposite side for the last edge. Once you're done with this side, then you're going to want to do a burr removal. So now our burr is on this side. What I like to do is edge trailing passes just like this. You're going to have to flip the knife over and over. You're basically just stropping on top of the stone, but very gentle. Do not add pressure, no pressure at all, because the stone is going to be able to do all the work by itself. It just needs to touch the burr. That's all it needs to do. So after you do that on each side several times, go to the strop. And that is all there is to it. I'm going to sharpen this knife on the exact same stone from the Sharpworx, and I'm going to compare my edge, my freehand edge, to the Sharpworx edge under a microscope. Now typically I prefer to remove my burr off of a lot finer grit stone, but since I don't have that option with this system, I'm going to do it just like how I would do it on the system, except for freehand. Let's look at it under a microscope. So let's look at the edge under the microscope. I'm going to zoom all the way out, and then we will try to zoom in as close as we can to the apex. Looks very clean. The apex looks good. The scratch pattern looks good. Very consistent. Looks like a nice flat edge bevel. Now let's try to zoom in and see the apex as much as possible. It's a little difficult, but we're going to do our best. This is a 1000 grit edge, strapped on 1 micron. So it appears to be pretty consistent. Pretty good. You can see the little microscopic teeth. If we back out a little bit, I might be able to get a little clearer. But yeah, looks really, really well done. Now let's do it on the Sharpworx and compare the two. Now here is the edge from the Sharpworx. It looks really good. The scratch pattern's good. It looks pretty consistent. I don't have very many facets or anything, which is good because I've had a little bit of trouble with that before. This one came out really good. However, the burr, the removal of the burr is quite a bit more crude, and I can see little pieces of micro tear out in some areas, and you know, some pieces where the burr is kind of still there. And you know, I've had this trouble with almost every single edge I have sharpened. This one's actually been probably one of the better ones, but some of the other ones it's been a little bit more of a struggle to remove the burr, and here's the reason why. So with a standard burr removal, in most cases, I will do some edge trailing passes. And I will do each side very gently, folding the burr back and forth until it snaps off. You don't want to just tear the burr off. That can lead to some issues. This is another reason why I like to use a finer grit stone when I remove a burr. However, the reason why my freehand edge did a lot better burr removal in every single case and every single sharpening I did with this system is because when I go to do the burr removal, look at this. This thing, it kind of flexes. So the pressure that it takes to go this way is slightly different than when I go this way because it flexes this little arm the opposite way. So when I'm pulling, it's flexing one direction, but when I'm pulling, it's flexing another direction. So it's a little bit more difficult to get it perfectly at the angle you want, or even just a little tiny bit higher, because I wouldn't mind that. Now, yeah, I could take it off the system and just do my standard burr removal, and that would work. That works just fine. But as far as people using the system, you're going to want to fatigue it as much as possible and then go to the strop, which is fine, but it doesn't lead to as clean of results as if you do it freehand. Some people might say just go from the stone right to the strop, but you don't want to do that, because what that does, if you have a really big burr or a really good burr, the strop is not going to remove it. And if you do remove it only on the strop, it could possibly cause some issues with microscopic tear out, leaving a little bit of burr behind, and things like that. You want it to naturally pop off. You want it to either naturally pop off from fatiguing it back and forth until it snaps off naturally, or two, you want to diminish it from one side to the other very slowly until you reveal a nice clean apex, and then clean the remainder off with the strop. But you don't want to go from a full metal wire from the heel of the blade all the way to the apex that's a really hard, stubborn burr, and just put it on a strop. In many cases, it's not going to come off, and if it does, it's going to come off crudely. So that's the reason why. It's not that big of a deal. It's not a deal breaker. Most people aren't going to have too big of a problem with this. You know, just know you'll get better results if you freehand remove the burr, or if you possibly and even better if you go to a higher grit stone of some sort, a ceramic, any sort of like 2500 grit and higher stone. Even an Arkansas can work good for this. An Arkansas hard, translucent, any sort of really, really hard, ultra fine stone. You're just trying to have the burr snag the stone and pop off. But here's my issues with this system. It's all plastic, so parts move. Like this is there's two different angles here happening, so you kind of have to make sure you hold it in the one angle and don't allow this to adjust right here, because it's just a screw head, which I've tried tightening, but it's just the way it is. Then, you know, this is, you know, a little janky. So because it's all plastic, it's not metal, it's not going to be the tightest tolerances, you could say. Yes, it works, but it does feel like, you know, it's a little flimsy. The diamond plate, while I don't mind a 400 and a 1000, if you're going to be doing anything that's got like a lot of wear or damage, you're going to want something lower than this. And this is, you know, in order to fit another plate on here or another stone on here, you'd have to get the one that fits. I did see with one of the other systems that I seen on Instagram that you can have any stone you want. With this one, you're limited to basically like a 2x6 or a 2x7. I'm not sure the exact measurement, but it'd have to be this exact size. You're very limited regardless. Now, also these diamond plates, I encourage, if you have to get what you have to get, right? That's fine. If, you know, if you have to save some money and you see some diamond plates that are like this or like any others, that's fine. But I prefer the solid plates, the ones with no lines, because I'm missing half the diamonds here. All these little lines do not have diamonds. All these little, whatever shape this is, you know, this pattern, this honeycomb pattern, none of that is diamonds. Same thing with this side. So now it, one, already has half the diamonds that I want on it, and number two, these can wear out a little bit faster. And I can already tell that this is not a diamond plate that's going to be a serious diamond plate. This is going to be something I'm going to want to replace fairly quickly. Maybe he has other stones, but the beautiful thing would be is if you could just have any stone you want. That way you can go and get a Tomas, you could get DMTs, or whatever you want, and put them, the Neeves, whatever. Now, I do like that he made it with diamonds, because I seen an original one that was using like Arkansas or something like that, and I don't think that that is the best way to sharpen. I think the best way is going to be on diamonds in today's knife market because of all the super steels we have and just different steels, different hardnesses, so on and so on. Diamonds cut better, they're easier to deal with, easier to tolerate. You don't have to soak them, you don't have to do anything, you can just start sharpening, which is a beautiful thing. So you just lock the blade in and you focus on sharpening. You don't have to focus on dunking a stone or constantly putting water on it. Now, the next thing that I do have a problem with, you know, is, you know, the base, it's very light. So you find yourself pushing it a lot. So I find myself having to hold it when I'm using it, which is not a big deal, but it just is what it is. Another thing is the magnets constantly stick to the plate. I'm glad it's a strong magnet, and that's something, you know, you can kind of avoid. However, things are going to stick to this. As far as the metal shavings are going to stick to this, so you're going to have to take some tape and dab this with tape every once in a while. And then the next thing is this scratches the hell out of your blades. Now, you could just tape your blades up. Absolutely, I tried doing that. I did do that on some of them. It'd be nice if they had like a removable rubber guard that you could just rinse off under a sink or something, and then just put it right back on, or clamp it on or something that's nice and thin, something so that the magnets will still be nice and strong, because that is the idea. You want the magnets as strong as possible. Now, you could just tape the magnets. You could do that too, and then just peel the tape off after. That's actually probably a really good idea, and you might want to do that. As far as, will this teach you how to do freehand knife sharpening? No, it will not. So I could see this possibly helping you get a little bit of a habit of holding an angle and understanding how to properly hold an angle, because once you have it, once you have an angle, right, as you're coming across the stone, you want to lock your wrist in most cases with freehand and then lift your elbow. With this, I do notice you have to sometimes use your wrist a little bit more than you would if you didn't have this. So that's one factor. So it's going to make you lean into habits that don't necessarily serve you well with freehand, unless if you're doing certain blade shapes. With certain blade shapes, yes. In that case, then you do use your wrist a little bit, but that's more for experienced freehand sharpeners. As far as basic drop points and stuff like that, you know, you don't have to really move your wrist. You can just literally move your elbow, your shoulder, or your body and lock your wrist. But with this, it seems that you do have to kind of move your wrist a little bit in order to get to the tip. Now you can lift your elbow, but I just find in some cases with some drop points or some blades, I do have to kind of move my wrist a little bit in order to get to the tip. The real reason why I don't think that this is going to be good for teaching freehand, and I'm not saying that they can't help. It might be able to help a little bit, but getting used to this thing holding your angle rather than your hand, which is what you want. If this thing's doing the angle holding for you, granted it might lead to you getting more consistent and better edges, but that doesn't mean it's going to leave you with the habit of holding that angle. Maybe a little bit, but it's better if something's not assisting you, and instead of putting forth the effort on something like this and learning this, you could just put forth the effort on freehand. I'm not saying don't get it. Let's talk about how the edges turn out. So all in all, the edges are halfway decent. The angles I don't think are very accurate. They're close, but they're not perfect, especially when you go from one side to the other. And like I said, you have this little bit of fluctuation, which can obviously change the angle for you. So I did notice that sometimes when I went from one side to the other, the angle was slightly different. Not to the extent that it was dramatic, like it wasn't something I would go crazy over, but it was a little bit different. Now, the problems that I did have is sometimes it's when you're sharpening, the angle can change just a little bit, and maybe it's the plastic, maybe it's this thing moving, but I notice I will see in some cases, not all, but in some, I will see some facets. Now this is just a way for me to show you how fast it is, so don't pay attention to the apex or anything, but you see how this line is going that way? It's going side to side. That's a change in angle. One angle was higher than the other. It's just where there's another one right there. You can barely see it, but it's going straight across. Those are just angle changes. So facets are when your angle is changing. They run side to side. Your scratch pattern is supposed to run up and down the edge bevel. Facets run side to side, and it's a huge indicator that your angle changed. Now, granted, the edges are still sharp. That's not even that big of a deal, to be honest. Your edge will still be good quality. It'll still be just fine. But, you know, it's more of a visual thing than anything. And, I mean, I guess it can lead to a more improper edge rather than, you know, if it was perfect. But sometimes, you know, you're not going for perfect. You're just going for good. And it will do that. It will absolutely do that. You will get a nice edge. And I suspect that over a long period of time, well, not even a short period of time, you will get really good at it, and your edges will only get more and more consistent, just like anything. I noticed that with me. 3 knives in, I was getting really, really good. The first knife in, it was not that great. But 3, 4 knives in, I started picking it up really well. I started like noticing the little tiny details that this thing kind of needs in order to function correctly, and it wound up working out. So I actually did have a plan in the future to bring something like this to the market, so I think it's awesome that he did it. And maybe I still will in the future. I do think as a great freehand sharpener that I could possibly design one that would be really well done. Now this is very well done, but some of the things that could be improved is, one, it could be made out of solid aluminum or solid metal, something to where, I would say add rubber too, right? Rubber and aluminum, but to where this thing's gonna have a little more weight and everything's gonna be tighter fit. The next thing is, you know, just little details like, you know, the way things are attached and prevented from moving. They can become loose and you've got to constantly check them. It'd be nice if this did not have these big, you know, maybe it was a screw head or something. I guess that's not that big of a deal, but I did notice like I would hit this thing sometimes it'd be over here and then now I'm hitting it, you know, so like I just noticed these little arms kind of got in the way a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. And like I said, this thing popped out on me a bunch of times. So it'd be nice, just like I said, if things were just fit together a little bit better and were made out of better materials, so they were constructed better, and then allow it to be a regular clamp. Allow it to be a clamp like this. Now, like I said, I did see one like that from Sharpworx, or yeah, from Sharpworx, but I didn't see it on the site. I didn't have the ability to get it. Now, I did originally purchase this and then purchase this, but the owner contacted me and did wind up sending me this part right here, which I do appreciate very much. Now, that being said, I'm surprised he didn't send me the upgraded one. I'm surprised he didn't do that if he knew that there was a better version. I think that that would have been smart on his end, so we didn't have to go through this, because at this point now I'm wondering, is everything that I'm complaining about already fixed? Maybe, I don't know. I'd have to try it. But all in all, it's cool. It's cool. It does work. It's not going to be, you know, the end all be all. But it does work, and it will work for, I think, the majority of medium to large size knives. I think, you know, maybe the really, really tiny ones will have the biggest issue. And then, you know, just you know, doing the motions correctly is going to be the biggest deal, which are pretty easy to do. If the knife starts coming off the magnet, you're doing something wrong. As long as the knife stays perfectly in the magnet and you're going across the stone perfectly without the knife popping off or anything, then you're doing it right. And that's kind of the whole gist of it. Anyways, there you guys go. Work hard, stay tough. Until next time, peace.